more and more expensive. Between a mortgage and groceries, daycare and cell phones, monthly bills are going up, and families deserve a government with a plan to do something about it. My friends, that's what we've delivered over the last 4 years, and that's what we're ready to keep delivering for the middle class. We're starting from a good place. After a decade of cuts and austerity under the previous Conservative government in 2015, Canadians voted for change. And we've made real progress, whether it's by lowering taxes on the middle class or by introducing the Canada Child Benefit. The results speak for themselves. Thanks to our plan, the average Canadian family is $2,000 better off than they were under Stephen Harper. That's what happens when you choose to invest in people. But we know our work isn't done. Families are still feeling the crunch. So here's our plan to keep moving forward. A re-elected Liberal government will lower taxes again for the middle class, saving the average family almost $600 every year. That matters to people, so we're going to get it done right away. Today, I can announce that cutting taxes for the middle class will be the first thing we do as a re-elected Liberal government. We did it before, and we'll do it again. Now, as much as investing in families should be a no-brainer, it isn't at the top of everyone's list. The first thing Andrew Scheer would do, his first action as Prime Minister, would be to tear up our plan to fight climate change, taking back the money that we're putting in your pockets. Because our price on pollution doesn't just keep our air clean, it makes big polluters pay and gives that money right back to families. That makes a real difference for people, but I guess Andrew Scheer doesn't think you should keep getting a hand. Think about that for a second. The first thing we'll do is keep moving forward to make your life more affordable. The first thing Andrew Scheer will do is to take us backward, and it'll make your life more expensive. Frankly, it's not just the environment that can't afford a Conservative government, it's the middle class. Because Andrew Scheer would reduce taxes for multi-millionaires by $50,000 a year. That's more money than most Canadians make in a year. I don't think the wealthiest should get a tax break. I think you should get a break. And whether it's this new tax cut or our commitment to reduce people's cell phone bills by 25% every month, that's what I'm focused on. En cette campagne électorale,
Actually, in an election campaign, it's important to remember that politics is there to serve people, not to serve multinationals, big polluters, or lobbyists. The idea is to help people to succeed, because ultimately Canada succeeds when Canadians succeed. And that is why the first thing that we will do as a government is to, again, lower taxes for Canadians. And in addition to giving a tax cut to the people who need it most, a Liberal government, if re-elected, will reduce your cell phone bills by 25% over the next 2 years. We are the only team to have a real plan to make life more affordable and help families make ends meet.
Won't reward big polluters and the wealthiest 1% with a whopping tax cut. Conservatives will. They always do. Exhibit A, Doug Ford. People here in Ontario are seeing what happens when politicians promise to be for the people and then cut the services they rely on. Larger classes for your kids, less support for your communities. That's the real cost of buck a beer. And now, Andrew Scheer wants Canadians to double down on Conservative politicians like Doug Ford. Twice the tax breaks for big polluters and the wealthy, and twice the cuts for you and your family. My friends, that's not the way it has to be, because we have a real plan to invest in Canadians and to make life more affordable for the middle class. On October 21st, we have a choice to make. Do we go back to the failed policies of the Harper years and double down on Doug Ford with Andrew Scheer, or do we keep moving forward? It's up for us to decide, and I know where I stand. I'm for moving forward for everyone. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Louis Blouin de Radio-Canada.
Radio-Canada. Good morning, Mr. Trudeau.
Que vous avez vers une majorité semble
your
de plus en
path
plus
to
étroite.
Victoria
seems
that may not work. You probably will lose seats in BC, the West, the Atlantic region. Where are you going to get the seats that you need to win? There's a week and a half left in this campaign, and I continue to meet with people right across this country to talk about the important choice they have to make between a conservative government that will tear up the only plan for the environment that Canada has ever had. As his first action, he will lower taxes for multimillionaires by $50,000. We will continue to lower taxes for the middle class by asking the wealthiest to pay a little more. And we will continue with an ambitious and realistic plan to fight climate change. I'm not taking anything for granted in this election campaign, and that's why we're continuing to work every single day to connect with Canadians and share our plan with them, a plan that will help Canadians, and the choice they have to choose forward or to go back to the Harper years.
We still have a little over a week and a half to go in this election, and over the coming days and week, we will be getting out there, talking to Canadians from coast to coast to coast about the really important choice they have to make in this election. The very first thing Andrew Scheer will do is rip up the only serious climate plan Canada has ever put in place. And the next thing he'll do is give a tax break worth $50,000 to multimillionaires. We are going to lower taxes for the middle class and continue to fight climate change in ways that supports ordinary families. That's the choice Canadians are facing, and that is what we're going to keep talking about over the coming days.
In Quebec, the Bloc
québécois is limiting your options for growth. So what can you say to Quebecers who are thinking of voting for the Bloc québécois? Quebecers, more than many other Canadians, are very concerned about the environment. And even though there are a number of parties in Quebec that agree that we need to do more on the environment, including the Liberal Party of Canada, the Bloc cannot bring forward a pan-Canadian plan to fight climate change, and the Conservatives don't want to take action on climate change. So if people are concerned about the future of their children and the future we are building together on this planet, we must make the right choice. Quebecers allowed Harper to continue to do nothing on climate change, Quebecers in the opposition. So we have to continue to fight hard against the big oil companies and conservative politicians because we have a better future to build together.
I've highlighted and recognized how much Quebecers, amongst many other Canadians, are preoccupied with the environment, are worried about climate change. And the Bloc cannot lead the fight against Jason Kenney and Doug Ford on a pan-Canadian vision to fight climate change, which is what we've put in place. And Andrew Scheer will not take on his friends Doug Ford and Jason Kenney to stand up against big oil and fight against climate change. The choice is very clear. Do Canadians want to wake up on the 22nd of October with a government that will rip up the only serious plan that has been put in place to fight climate change in the history of the country, and let Andrew Scheer cut taxes for multimillionaires by $50,000 a year? Or we will continue to move forward on lower taxes for the middle class and people working hard to join it, and a real plan for our kids' future, that fights climate change and builds a stronger economy.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. I'd like to ask you again, just what my colleague was talking about there. The path to a majority seems less likely right now. When voters go, they might want to know how you would work with someone else, potentially, and who would you work with best?
I think I'm not taking any votes for granted across this country, and we are working in ridings right across the country because I've heard clearly from Canadians that they don't want to see tax breaks to people who are multimillionaires, tax breaks that Andrew Scheer is proposing that'll be $50,000 in tax break for multimillionaires, which is more money than the average Canadian makes in a year. We're going to lower taxes for the middle class. We're going to fight climate change with a realistic, ambitious, and doable plan. And we're going to continue working hard for Canadians every single day. And the choice Canadians are facing in this election is go back to Stephen Harper's approach that does nothing on the environment, does nothing for economic growth, and gives tax breaks to the wealthiest, or move forward on a plan that has lifted 900,000 people out of poverty, that has seen over 1 million jobs, most of them full-time, created over the past 4 years, and seen a real plan to both fight climate change and make it affordable for Canadians. That's the choice Canadians are facing, and that's what we're going to stay focused on.
Okay, I'm going to try again. Would you be willing to work with the Bloc Québécois, which Canadians see as a separatist party, even though they call themselves nationalist?
I think Canadians know that I have always stood for Canadian unity and always will. But quite frankly, even as I crisscross Quebec and the rest of the country, Canadians are not talking to me about national unity. Canadians are not worried about national unity, nor should they be. They are focused on having a government that has a real plan to fight climate change, that has a real plan to push back against Doug Ford and Jason Kenney and the big oil companies who wrote Andrew Scheer's environment plan. We are going to keep making sure that we're lowering taxes for the middle class and people working hard to join it, and rejecting Andrew Scheer's proposal to cut taxes by $50,000 for the wealthiest Canadians. That doesn't make any sense. It didn't work under the Harper years in terms of creating growth and opportunity for families, and that's why we turned that around. We invested in Canadians, we invested in their communities, and 4 years later, we're seeing the impact. Now the choice is, do we continue to move forward, or do we go back to the failures of the Harper years?
Good morning, Prime Minister, Liberal leader Mr. Trudeau, pardon me, David Aiken from Global News.
Still Prime Minister.
Yes, still Prime Minister, very true. Sorry, just let me get my notes handy. I guess I'd like to know, and when we talked about government cuts, why your government has suddenly decided not to pay the provinces for their costs to provide health care to Canadian servicemen and women, and do you think it's responsible to men and women in uniform that they could be stuck with health care bills because of that decision?
This is unfortunately another example of conservative misinformation. What we are looking at is ensuring that there is fairness. The reality is that the federal government is being charged significantly higher prices for the same services for military members as it offers to other Canadians, and we're just looking at making sure that the system is fair for everyone. The reality is what we're looking at will not cut any services to any military members, nor will it negatively impact hospitals or service providers. But we're seeing a lot of conservative misinformation in this election campaign. Canadians need to be attentive to that.
Turning to a different matter, on Monday night in Nathan Cullen's riding of Skeena-Balka Valley, the Fraser Lake and District Chamber of Commerce held an all-candidates debate. The moderator asked all candidates, what are your views on women's rights and abortion? And your candidate, the Liberal candidate, Dave Birdie, replied, and I'm quoting directly here, I am a pro-life, and one thing I don't do is I don't judge anyone who's in that situation. I leave that up to God and the woman. You have said, and I'm quoting you now, someone who's not ready to defend women's rights cannot run for the Liberal Party. Should Dave Birdie be running for your party?
Obviously, we will be having conversations with that candidate, but every single candidate, every single future and present Liberal MP needs to defend a woman's right to choose, and that means if they are candidates for us, they have agreed that they will not support any efforts by anyone in the House of Commons to limit women's reproductive rights. The Liberal Party is unequivocally a pro-choice party, and we will never support limiting women's rights to choose.
Just to follow up on...
Nous sommes un parti
we are a party
de façon non équivoque,
that is pro-choice, and that is very clear. All our candidates must agree to never support any initiative that will limit women's choices.
You say conversations, that sounds ominous. Are you considering dumping that candidate?
Not at all. If that candidate is a candidate, it is because they made the engagement in writing to never accept that anyone would limit women's rights. We are a pro-choice party. We will always remain a pro-choice party.
We're in a community with very close ties to China. 2 Canadian citizens remain imprisoned in China, coming up on a year in December. We've seen the pictures from Hong Kong of brutal treatment of democracy protesters there, and yet you've had one of your cabinet ministers attend a gala celebrating the founding of the People's Republic of China. Wondering at what point do you start to reconsider our diplomatic relationship and take actual concrete diplomatic action against China?
We have been considering and being very careful in our approach diplomatically and economically with China over the past years. We have mobilized countries from around the world who have stood up strongly and expressed to China their concern over the 2 Canadians who've been arbitrarily detained, which is always at the very top of our list whenever there is an engagement with Chinese diplomats or officials. We recognize that the arbitrary detention of Canadians is illegitimate and wrong, and we need to make sure we are moving forward to get those Canadians home. At the same time, we recognize that China is a growing economic and political power in the world, and we have to work with them to try and ensure both opportunities for Canadians and that they continue to and endeavor to play by the rules as established in the current global rules-based order. That is something that continues to require effort and engagement, but we will always do that in a way that stands up first and foremost for Canadian interests and for the Canadians that are in difficulty.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Your opponent is at the Roxham Road crossing this morning, and I wanted to ask what plans you would have if you're re-elected to stop border crossings outside of legitimate border posts, and also to ask how the renegotiation of the Safe Third Country agreement is proceeding, where you're at in talks with the United States.
First of all, I'm pleased that people will be seeing the infrastructure that we've built at Roxham Road to ensure that every single person who crosses our border, whether it is regularly or irregularly, gets fully processed by our immigration system. They get full security screenings, they get placed into our immigration system and go through every step of our immigration process. There are no shortcuts. There are no skipping steps within our immigration system. Everyone arriving in Canada goes through the same immigration system, a full, rigorous immigration system that is being applied. We are going to continue to work with partners in the United States and around the world, directly talk with communities about the fact that there are no shortcuts into Canada, and we will continue to strengthen the application of our immigration system. Because one of the reasons Canadians are in favor of immigration still when other countries are turning away is that we understand that it is beneficial to our economy, to our communities, to our country to have diverse people coming here and building a better future for themselves. But it only stays positively supported by Canadians because they have confidence that our immigration system works, and it works and continues to apply. In regards to the United States, we continue to engage with them on measures that will strengthen our cooperation, our collaboration, and the integrity of our borders.
And I wanted to ask you also about President Trump's abandonment of the Kurds to a possible invasion by Turkey. Those, of course, are not only American allies, they were Canada's allies, as you know, for many years, fought alongside Canadian soldiers for many years. And they also hold probably a few dozen Canadians who were formerly members of the Islamic State in their prisons, which are in the potential invasion zone. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, how do you react, how do you feel about that abandonment of the Kurds? What message would you send to the United States, to Turkey and others? And also, how do you plan on dealing with the situation of those former Islamic State members who may now be set free?
We obviously are working very closely with our allies, obviously the United States, but also other allies in the region, to ensure that we are creating long-term peace and stability in the Middle East. We recognize that this is an area Canada has stepped up. Over the past years, we were very much involved in training in northern Iraq, even though we were not in Syria, we were in northern Iraq, and we continue to lead the NATO training mission out of Baghdad to make sure that we're promoting stability and long-term institutional and people stability in Iraq. We're obviously monitoring very closely the developments in the region between the United States and Turkey, and we will continue to put stability in the region and security of Canadians at the very front order. It is a crime in Canada to travel abroad for the purpose of promoting or supporting or participating in terrorist acts, and we will continue to ensure that the law is applied. Okay.
I think it's important that people see the infrastructure and the measures that we have put in place at Roxham Road, so that we can continue to fully apply the immigration system as it exists in Canada. The security checks, all the different steps in the immigration process are followed fully for anyone coming into Canada, whether it's through the regular or irregular process. We have a system that works. We were able to make the necessary investments to ensure that the system continues to work, and I have to recognize that the Quebec government and, of course, the residents of Roxham Road who have been affected by this new reality have been extraordinary partners in all of this, so that we can ensure that we continue to have an immigration system that works for all and applies to all.
On the go back to the military funding for hospitals, can you explain why some hospitals were charging more to treat military personnel as well? If you're renegotiating to make it more fair, will that not impact the bottom line of those hospitals that perhaps have been relying on that extra funding?
That is why we've established a working group to exactly look into that. But we have made it very, very clear that no military service members will get any cuts to services, and hospitals and care providers will not be negatively impacted by this unequal treatment.
And I want to quickly turn to the debt to GDP. You've said repeatedly that the federal debt to GDP is in pretty good shape, but when you include the provinces and the municipalities, we're actually in very bad shape, perhaps as bad as Italy by some accounts. Given that many economists expect perhaps a recession or at least a market downturn coming, what kind of flexibility would your government have under your plan if re-elected?
We have a very different approach than Conservatives have had in the past and have right now in this election. We don't believe that cuts to services for people and austerity and tax breaks for the wealthiest creates growth or helps Canadian families in any way. Stephen Harper tried that for 10 years and had low growth and a lot of families were hurt. We made a different decision in 2015. One, to raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% and lower them for the middle class. To invest in families with things like the Canada Child Benefit or the Guaranteed Income Supplement increase. To invest in infrastructure like public transit and new housing. and transportation infrastructure. And that has led us to having the best balance sheet in the G7 that is being put to work for Canadians. We know that one of the best ways to strengthen families and communities against rough waters in the global economy is to invest in them, give them the opportunities to build a stronger present and a better future for their kids. That is the opposite decision from what Andrew Scheer is proposing. He wants to lower taxes for multimillionaires by $50,000. And we're going to lower taxes for the middle class and give nothing to the wealthiest Canadians. That's the choice Canadians are facing in this upcoming election.
Good morning, Prime Minister. I wanted to ask you about what your message is to the undecided progressive voters, particularly here in the GTA, who might be wondering if how they should vote, and if they're undecided, could potentially split the vote and deliver a win for Conservatives.
I think Canadians saw in the debate on Monday night that talked about the environment throughout the entire debate on every different theme. And I've heard it from Canadians right across the country that affordability and the environment are top of mind in this election. And over the past 4 years, even though we recognize there's a need to do much more and we have a plan to do more, we have done more to fight climate change than any government in the history of this country. And we're going to continue to do that. We have lowered taxes for the middle class, saving average Canadians about $2,000 every single year as compared to the final Harper years. We know that investing in Canadians and standing up to Doug Ford and Jason Kenney on the environment is what we need from our government. And that's exactly what we've been doing and what we will continue to do. The choice facing Canadians is very, very clear. Do we have a strong government that stands up to Doug Ford and Jason Kenney, or do we double down on conservative cuts, austerity, and tax breaks for the wealthy with no plan for the environment?
I think the choice is very clear for Canadians. I've talked to a lot of families who are concerned about the cost of living and the need to do more for the environment. And our Liberal Party has shown over the last 4 years that we have a plan. We lowered taxes for the middle class and we raised them for the 1% wealthiest Canadians. And we put forward the first real, serious plan to fight climate change in the history of the country. However, the Conservatives are proposing the same thing as in the Harper years, no plan to fight climate change, and even worse than that, they will totally scrap the only real plan that Canada has ever had to fight climate change. In addition to that, they will give tax cuts to the tune of $50,000 more to multimillionaires. We believe that is a bad choice and takes us in the wrong direction. We have decided to go forward, and we intend to propose a strong government that will fight the ideas of Jason Kennedy and Doug Ford, and we will continue to lower taxes for the middle class and provide more services to our young people, to seniors, to families, and all those who need them. That is the choice Canadians are facing. And I look forward to continue to talk about that in the coming days because we have a lot of work to do in the next 4 years. Thank you very much.